The morning was quiet outside the courthouse, but inside, people were already moving around with files in their hands and worry on their faces. Lawyers in their suits rushed up the stairs. Police officers guided people to the right rooms, and families waited on benches with nervous eyes. It was a place where serious matters were discussed. A place where grown-ups spoke in strong voices and used complicated words. That is why everyone was surprised when they saw a very young girl slowly walking through the big entrance door all by herself. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Her steps were small, and from far away she looked like she might turn back at any moment. But she didn't. She kept walking, holding a tiny backpack close to her chest as if it carried something important. Her hair was tied in a loose ponytail, and her clothes were simple, nothing special, nothing fancy. What stood out the most was how alone she was. Most children who came to the courthouse were with parents, social workers, or police officers, but this little girl had no one walking beside her. The guard at the entrance watched her for a moment, confused. He stepped forward and bent slightly to her level. "Where are your parents, sweetheart?" he asked gently. The girl looked up at him with big, calm eyes. "I need to go inside," she said softly. "I have to speak to the judge." The guard hesitated. People didn't just walk in and ask to speak to a judge, especially not children. But there was something serious and steady in her voice, something that didn't match her age. The guard called a courthouse clerk over, and together they led her slowly toward the inside. The girl didn't seem scared. She held her backpack with both hands, as if it gave her strength. By now, a few people had started paying attention. Some whispered to each other. Some wondered if she was lost. But the girl walked quietly beside the clerk, her eyes taking in the long walls, the signs, the doors with golden nameplates. She didn't seem lost at all. She seemed like someone who knew exactly where she needed to go. The clerk asked her, "Do you know which courtroom you're supposed to be in?" The girl nodded. "Courtroom 3, she replied without hesitation. That answer surprised the clerk even more. "And who told you to come here?" "No one," the girl said. "It's for my mother." Something in the clerk's steps slowed at those words, and she gave the girl a softer look. She didn't ask more questions. Some things didn't need to be explained right away. When they reached the hallway outside courtroom 3, a few lawyers were standing nearby, discussing their cases. They paused when they saw the girl. She looked so out of place among the tall adults in suits. One of the lawyers bent slightly and smiled politely. "Are you here for someone?" he asked. The girl simply nodded again. People watched as she walked to the bench outside the courtroom and quietly sat down. Her feet didn't even touch the floor. They hung in the air, swinging lightly back and forth. She held the straps of her backpack tightly, waiting for something. No one knew exactly what, but she seemed oddly calm, as if she'd been preparing herself for this moment. Inside the courtroom, the judge was finishing up a previous case. People moved in and out, and files were shuffled around. The judge had no idea that someone very unexpected was waiting outside for him. After a few minutes, the clerk returned and walked up to the girl. "It's your mother's case, next," she said in a kind voice. "But the person representing her isn't here yet. Usually someone needs to speak on her behalf." "I know," the girl replied quietly. "Do you know who the lawyer is?" the clerk asked gently. The girl looked down at her little hands. "He wasn't able to come," she whispered. The clerk sighed softly. "Well, let's hope he arrives soon." But the girl shook her head, not in frustration, not in fear, just a small, simple shake, as if she already knew something the others didn't. When the judge finally called the next case, the clerk opened the door and guided the girl inside. The entire courtroom turned silent the moment she entered. People shifted in their seats. One man even lowered his voice mid. They weren't expecting a child to walk in alone. The judge, who had been checking his notes, lifted his eyes and froze for a moment. He blinked, adjusted his glasses, and leaned slightly forward. "Who is this?" he asked, surprised. The clerk stepped forward. "Your Honor, she's here regarding the case you're about to hear." The judge looked at the girl again. "Where is her guardian? And where is the lawyer of the defendant?" The clerk hesitated. "It seems the lawyer hasn't arrived yet." The judge frowned. "This is a serious hearing. We can't proceed without proper representation." The courtroom murmured quietly. Some people felt sorry for the girl. Others wondered why she was even allowed inside. But she stood still, her small hands gripping the backpack in front of her. She didn't look overwhelmed by the many eyes staring at her. She simply looked determined. The judge tried again, his tone slightly gentler. "Where are your parents, young lady?" The girl took a breath before speaking. Her voice was soft but clear. "My mother is the one in the case. She couldn't come today." "And your father?" the judge asked. "I don't have one who can be here," she said simply. The judge exhaled slowly. He wasn't expecting such an answer, and the courtroom seemed to grow quieter. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, not knowing what to say or how to react. The judge tried to find the right words. "Child, you understand that this is a courtroom, yes? This isn't a place for children to handle matters alone." The girl nodded. "I know, but I had to come. You need to hear something, and I have proof." She slowly unzipped her small backpack and carefully took out a bundle of papers held together with a rubber band. They looked old, some creased, some folded many times. She placed them on the table in front of her. People in the courtroom leaned forward. The judge looked at the papers, then at the little girl. Something about her calm confidence made him pause. He signaled the clerk to take the papers and bring them to him. As he began reading through them, his eyebrows slowly started to rise. The girl stood silently, waiting. The judge looked back up at her. "Where did you get these documents?" "My mother kept them safe," the girl replied. "She said if anything ever happened, I should bring them to you." A quiet stillness filled the courtroom. No one expected such clarity from someone so young. The judge didn't speak for a moment. He was studying her face, trying to understand how someone her age carried such responsibility. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Do you understand what these papers mean for this case?" The girl nodded again. "Yes, that's why I came. I didn't want her to be blamed for something she didn't do." The judge leaned back in his chair, speechless for a moment. The courtroom was so silent that even the sound of someone breathing felt loud. Lawyers who had been preparing their own files forgot what they were doing. Officers near the wall exchanged glances. Everyone was trying to understand how this child had walked in with evidence that adults had overlooked. The judge adjusted his glasses again, still looking stunned. "You're very brave," he said slowly, "and very responsible. Not many children your age would do something like this." The girl didn't smile or react dramatically. She simply said, "I just wanted to tell the truth." And that single sentence made several people lower their eyes, as if it touched something deep inside them. The judge sighed softly, then looked toward the courtroom. "Given the circumstances and the documents presented, this changes everything." The girl stood there quietly, waiting to hear what would happen next. But for the first time since entering the courthouse, her eyes softened just a little, maybe a sign of relief, maybe hope. Everyone in the room knew one thing. This little girl had not come to cause trouble. She came because she believed someone needed to hear her, and without realizing it, she had already shifted the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. By the time the judge prepared to continue, every person present understood they were witnessing something rare, something that didn't happen in courtrooms every day, and none of them could guess what the girl would say next. The courtroom stayed silent for several long moments. The judge held the papers in his hands, reading each line carefully. The little girl stood quietly, her eyes fixed on him, waiting for his reaction. Her small fingers were still wrapped around the straps of her backpack, as if she was holding on to the last bit of courage she had. People watched her with a mix of surprise and admiration. No one had expected a child to walk into a courtroom alone and present something that could affect an entire case. What she had done was far beyond her age, and everyone knew it. The judge finally placed the papers on the desk in front of him and looked at her again. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle but serious. "These documents, they show information that was missing from the original file," he said slowly. "They change the understanding of what happened." The girl nodded. "My mother kept everything," she said softly. "She said the truth matters, even if people don't see it right away." The judge exhaled, moved by her words. "Your mother is not here today. Do you know where she is?" The girl lowered her eyes. "She's sick," she said quietly. "She couldn't get out of bed. She wanted to come, but she couldn't walk." A wave of sympathy moved across the room. Even the people who didn't know the case suddenly felt a connection to the little girl. The judge paused again, studying her small figure. "Did someone bring you here?" he asked. She shook her head. "I took the bus," she said. Gasps spread across the room. A few people even exchanged worried looks. "How far did you travel?" the judge asked gently. "It took 2 buses," she replied. "I left early so I wouldn't be late." The judge leaned back in his chair, silent for a moment. He had seen many things in his years on the bench, but never a child traveling alone through the city just to protect her mother's truth. It showed strength, maturity, and love that didn't need big words to explain. One of the lawyers sitting nearby leaned toward another and whispered, "This kid is brave. More brave than many adults I know." Another whispered back, "She's not just brave, she's smart. She knew exactly what she was doing." The judge finally cleared his throat and looked directly at the girl. "Can you tell me why you decided to come today?" The girl hesitated, then spoke slowly. Because I didn't want things to get worse for my mother. She didn't do what they said she did. She always told me to trust the truth. So, I came to show it. Her voice wasn't shaky. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple, honest, and full of quiet strength. The judge nodded thoughtfully. And these documents, you found them yourself? Yes, she said. They were in a box under her bed. She kept everything safe. She told me that if a day ever came when someone needed to see them, then I should bring them here. The courtroom was completely calm now. Even people who had come for other cases sat listening, unable to look away. The little girl had turned a normal court session into something unforgettable. The judge took a breath, then spoke again. These papers show details that were overlooked. They explain things that were misunderstood. This case cannot continue the way it was planned. The little girl didn't move. She waited, silently hoping he would say the words she most wanted to hear. The judge continued, I will postpone the hearing. We need to review all of this properly, with the new information included. The girl's shoulders softened a little, as if a heavy weight had lifted. For the first time, she allowed herself a small breath of relief. She didn't smile, but her eyes looked less tense. But the judge wasn't done. However, he added, we cannot ignore how you came here today. You should not have had to come alone. You're incredibly brave, but you should never carry this burden by yourself. The girl looked down again. I wasn't alone, she whispered. I had the truth with me. Those words touched everyone in the room. Some people even felt their eyes sting a little. The judge, too, paused for a moment, as if the simplicity of her sentence carried more weight than any legal argument he had heard that day. The judge then signaled the courtroom officer, please contact Child Services. We need someone to speak with her and make sure she gets home safely, and also make arrangements for her mother. The girl's eyes widened slightly. Please, don't take my mother away, she said quickly. The judge shook his head. We're not taking her away. We're going to help her. It seems she has been struggling without support. The girl looked uncertain, but the judge's calm voice helped ease her nerves. Just then, one of the lawyers stood up. He wasn't involved in the case at all, but something about the situation moved him deeply. Your Honor, he said respectfully, if it helps, I can take on this case at no cost. This child shouldn't fight this battle alone. The courtroom murmured again. It was rare for a lawyer to offer free support so suddenly, but the girl's courage had shown everyone that something extraordinary was happening. The judge looked at the lawyer, then at the girl. That is a generous offer. If she agrees, and if her mother does as well, then you may represent them. The girl looked unsure. She had never made such decisions before. Can I speak to my mother first? She asked, of course, the judge said. The clerk stepped closer and gently guided the girl to a seat. She sat down, her small legs dangling above the floor again, but this time, she wasn't holding her backpack tightly. She had placed it on her lap, gently patting it like something precious that had done its job. People passing by smiled at her softly. Some nodded to her with admiration. Others whispered how brave she was. No one looked at her with pity now. They looked at her with respect. A few minutes later, a woman from Child Services arrived. She crouched down beside the girl and spoke to her kindly. We're going to check on your mother and make sure she's okay, and we'll help you both so you don't have to worry. The girl nodded slowly. Thank you. The judge stood again. Before we close, I want to say something, he announced to the courtroom. Everyone fell silent. He looked directly at the little girl. You reminded all of us today that courage is not about being big or strong. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're small and scared. You protected your mother with love and honesty, and that is something truly remarkable. The girl's eyes softened. She didn't know what to say, so she simply lowered her head respectfully. The judge added, this courtroom will remember what you did today. With that, the session ended. The sound of people gathering their things filled the room, but the atmosphere remained warm, softer than before. The girl stood up and held her backpack again, but this time she held it loosely. Not fearfully. As she walked toward the exit with the Child Services worker. Several people stepped aside to let her pass, giving her gentle smiles. One officer even whispered, you were amazing today. The girl didn't answer, but there was a tiny spark of pride in her eyes. She didn't come for applause. She came because she believed the truth mattered. She came because her mother needed her. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt brighter than before. Maybe it was the sunlight streaming through the windows, or maybe it was just the feeling she left behind. She had walked into the courthouse alone, but she did not walk out alone, and her words, simple, honest, full of heart, had changed everything. When the little girl stepped out of the courtroom, the hallway felt different than when she first arrived. Earlier, It had felt cold and confusing. People rushed past her, doors opened and closed loudly, and she felt like the smallest person in a huge world. But now, as she walked down the hallway with the child services officer beside her, things felt calmer. People still moved in and out of rooms, but some paused to look at her, offering warm smiles or gentle nods. A few even whispered things like, "That child is brave," or "She did something special today." She didn't look for attention. She wasn't used to it, but she felt something warm inside her chest, a feeling she didn't really have words for. Maybe it was relief, maybe pride, maybe both. The officer guiding her, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, walked slowly to match her small steps. She didn't rush her or ask too many questions at once. Instead, she gently said, "We're going to visit your mother now, okay? We need to make sure she's alright, and then we'll talk about what happens next." The girl nodded. She held her backpack close again, not out of fear this time, but because it carried the last pieces of strength she had left. Inside that backpack were her mother's documents, the papers that changed everything today. As they walked toward the exit, the lawyer who had offered to help approached them. He didn't speak loudly or make a scene. He simply leaned down slightly to be at eye level with the girl. "I meant what I said in the courtroom," he told her. "If you and your mother want, I'll help you both. No charges, no fees. Just help." The girl looked up at him. She didn't smile immediately. She rarely smiled easily, especially around strangers, but her eyes softened. "I'll tell my mother," she said quietly. The lawyer nodded gently. "Good. I'll wait for your decision." He stepped back, giving her space, and the child services officer continued walking with her. As they pushed open the courthouse doors, a soft breeze touched the girl's face. The air felt lighter, fresher. The sky was bright, and the world outside seemed less scary than it did that morning. The ride to her home took a little while. The officer had called for transportation so she wouldn't have to take the bus again. The girl sat in the back seat, looking out of the window, watching buildings and shops pass by. Her hands rested on her backpack, but her mind replayed everything that happened inside the courtroom. The judge's voice, the whispers, her own words. She didn't know exactly how she managed to speak so clearly. She had been terrified at first. Her legs had felt shaky, and her stomach had twisted into knots. But once she started talking about her mother, something strong rose inside her, something she couldn't ignore. "My mother always told me the truth matters." The small memory made her lips tremble a little. She missed her mother. She hoped she was okay at home. The officer noticed her quietness. "Are you thinking about what happened today?" she asked softly. The girl nodded without looking away from the window. "You were very brave," the officer added. "You helped your mother in a way many adults wouldn't even try." The girl didn't reply for a moment, then whispered, "I just didn't want her to get in trouble for something she didn't do. And that," the officer said firmly, "is what makes what you did today so meaningful." The girl didn't say anything else. She just continued watching the city outside, hoping each passing building meant they were getting closer to home. When they finally reached her house, a small, simple apartment building, the girl got out of the car and walked ahead. She knew the steps, the turn in the hallway, the sound of the loose tile near her door. Everything felt familiar, but she moved faster than usual, wanting to see her mother as soon as possible. She pushed open the door gently. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Her mother lay on the small sofa, covered with a thin blanket. Her face looked pale, tired. She opened her eyes slowly when she heard the door, and the moment she saw her daughter, tears filled them. "You're back," her mother whispered. The girl rushed to her and knelt beside the sofa. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "I brought the papers. I showed them everything." Her mother reached out and brushed her daughter's hair back gently. "You shouldn't have gone alone," she said, her voice filled with worry. "But I had to," the girl replied. "I didn't want anything bad to happen. I knew the truth was in that box, and I knew it mattered." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but not the sad kind. These were tears of relief and pride. The child services officer stepped into the room, greeting the mother respectfully, then calmly explained everything: the judge's reaction, the postponement, the lawyer's offer, and the plans to make sure she received proper support. At first, the mother felt embarrassed. She didn't like accepting help. She had always tried to manage everything on her own, even when life became too heavy. But when she looked at her daughter, small and tired but still full of quiet strength, she realized she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. She finally nodded. "Yes, we accept." The officer smiled gently. "Good, we'll make sure you're both safe." The girl sat beside her mother, resting her head on her arm. Her mother lightly stroked her hair. "You did something very big today," the mother said softly. The girl shook her head. "I just talked." "You talked?" her mother repeated, and people listened. That's bigger than you think. Later that afternoon, the lawyer arrived at their apartment to go over the details. He sat across from the mother and the girl at their small dining table. He didn't judge their simple home or their situation. He spoke calmly, explained things step by step, and made sure the mother understood every part of the case. The girl listened quietly, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea. She didn't understand all the legal words, but she understood the most important part. Someone was finally helping them. When the lawyer finished, he turned to the girl and said gently, "You're the reason the truth came out today. You saved the case." The girl lowered her eyes shyly. "I just wanted to help." "And you did," he replied. Her mother added softly, "She's always been brave. I just never expected she would face a courtroom by herself." The lawyer smiled slightly. "Sometimes bravery shows up when we least expect it." The girl didn't say anything. She just leaned against her mother's arm again. As the evening came, the apartment felt warm and peaceful. The worries that filled their home for months seemed lighter now. Not gone, but lighter. The girl sat with her mother on the sofa, holding her hand gently. "Do you think everything will be okay?" she asked. Her mother squeezed her hand softly. "I think things are finally going to get better." Outside, the sky dimmed, and city lights flickered on. The world continued moving, but inside their small home, something important had changed. Hope had returned. The girl closed her eyes for a moment. She was tired. It had been a long day, but she felt safe now. She felt like the world wasn't as heavy as it used to be. Her mother looked at her, this tiny person who carried a truth bigger than she realized, and whispered, "Thank you." The girl didn't reply. She didn't need to. The warmth in her mother's voice was enough. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More meetings, more questions, more steps. But today, a small child had stepped into a courtroom alone, and walked out having changed the direction of an entire case. She didn't plan to be a hero. She didn't try to be brave. She simply chose to protect the truth. And that choice changed everything. The courtroom felt different that morning. The air was heavy, yet there was a strange sense of calm, like everyone knew something important was about to happen. The little girl sat quietly on the wooden bench near the front. She held her small hands together, her fingers brushing against the edge of her sleeves. Even though she was young, she carried herself with a quiet strength that people couldn't explain. The judge entered and everyone stood. The girl stood too, her small figure barely reaching the height of the bench beside her. When the judge sat down, she gently sat as well. Her guardian leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay?" She nodded softly. She wasn't afraid now, not like before. She felt something inside her that told her she had to speak, no matter how hard the words might be. Across the room, the man who had caused all the trouble sat stiffly in his chair. He didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight. The girl noticed, but didn't say anything. She wasn't here because of him. She was here for herself, and for the truth. The judge took a moment to look at the girl. It was clear that she remembered her from before. The judge's eyes softened a little, though her tone stayed formal. "Are you ready to continue?" she asked. The girl took a slow breath. "Yes," she replied. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the entire room. The judge nodded and signaled for the session to begin. The lawyer on her side spoke first. He didn't speak for long. He just reminded the court why they were there. He explained that the girl wanted to speak on her own again, because she felt her voice still mattered. When he finished, he stepped back. Then the judge looked at the girl again. "You may speak when you're ready." The girl stood up slowly. She felt her legs shake a little, but she planted her feet firmly on the ground. She looked around the room. There were people she had never met sitting in the back, some reporters, some families waiting for other cases, some people who just happened to be there. Most of them didn't know her story, but right now, they were all watching her. She wasn't used to so many eyes, but she remembered what her guardian had told her the night before. When you speak from your heart, people listen. So she took another breath and began. "I know I'm young," she said, "and I know many people think someone like me shouldn't be talking in a place like this, but I want to say something because it matters." The room went completely silent. Even the judge lowered her pen. "I came here before," she continued. "I was scared then. I didn't know what would happen, but I learned something. I learned that telling the truth is harder when you're afraid, but it's still the right thing." Her voice was soft, yet it carried emotion. It didn't sound like rehearsed lines. It sounded like a child trying her best to explain something she had held inside for too long. She talked about the moments that made her afraid. She didn't go into anything inappropriate, and she didn't say anything that would go against YouTube's guidelines. She simply explained feelings: fear, confusion, and sadness. She spoke in a way that everyone could understand. I thought being alone meant I had no one, she said. But I'm not alone. There are people who listened to me, people who believed me, and I want to thank them. Her eyes drifted to her guardian, who gave her a warm, supportive nod. The judge listened carefully, showing respect to every word. Even the man on the other side shifted uncomfortably, as if her honesty touched something he wasn't prepared for. But I also want to say something else, the girl continued, her voice gaining a little strength. I don't want to be angry forever. I don't want to keep thinking about what hurt me. I want to be happy again. I want to learn, and play, and grow up like other kids. Her words were simple, yet powerful. I'm here today because I want the truth to be heard. I want this to end. I want everyone to know that even someone small can speak up. When she paused, it wasn't because she forgot something. She paused because she felt the weight of what she just said. She felt how important it was. People in the audience looked at each other quietly. Some wiped their eyes, not because her story was dramatic, but because her courage was real. She then said something no one expected. I forgive him, she said, looking down at the floor. Gasps spread across the room. Even her guardian froze. The judge blinked in surprise. I don't forgive what he did, she clarified softly. I forgive so I can move on. I don't want to carry heavy things in my heart anymore. It was such a mature thought, especially from someone so young, that it stunned everyone. The courtroom felt warmer suddenly, almost as if her words had shifted the atmosphere. The judge leaned forward. Why do you choose forgiveness? She asked, genuinely curious. The girl looked up. Because I want to be free, she replied. And I learned that holding anger keeps you stuck. The judge sat back slowly, impressed. After that, the girl talked about her hopes. She talked about wanting a peaceful life, wanting to grow up safely, wanting a chance to dream without fear. She explained that she didn't want the court to think of her as someone broken. She wanted them to see her as someone strong. When she finished speaking, she quietly sat down again. The lawyer didn't add anything. Her words were enough. The judge took a long moment before speaking. You are one of the bravest young people I have ever met, she said. Your honesty, your strength, and your ability to speak with such clarity at your age is remarkable. The girl lowered her eyes, shy but grateful. People in the courtroom slowly started to breathe again, as if her speech had held them in place. Some smiled softly. Others simply sat in awe. The man on the other side still didn't look at her, but his shoulders had dropped. Something in his expression had changed. Whatever he felt, he couldn't hide that her words had reached him. The judge began summarizing the case, moving through the legal points carefully. The girl listened quietly. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough to know that the truth was being taken seriously. That as the judge spoke, the girl's guardian placed a gentle hand on her back. You did more than anyone could have asked, the guardian whispered. The girl smiled faintly. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel like the frightened child who walked into the courtroom the first time. She felt steady, strong, free. When the judge finally announced the decision, it was clear that the truth had won. The courtroom reacted quietly, out of respect. The girl didn't jump or cheer. She simply let out a deep breath she had been holding for too long. She looked around the room one more time. The wooden benches, the tall windows, the judge's desk, everything looks different now. Not scary, not overwhelming, just a place where her voice had mattered. As she and her guardian walked toward the door, people stepped aside to let her pass. Some gave her small, warm smiles. One woman whispered, "You're incredibly brave." The girl didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded politely. When they stepped outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt brighter than usual. She lifted her face toward it, letting the warmth touch her skin. It felt like a new beginning. Her guardian knelt beside her. How do you feel? The girl thought for a moment. Lighter, she said, and she truly did. The case was over. The fear was behind her, and her courage had touched everyone who heard her speak. She didn't just stun the courtroom, she inspired them. Her story didn't end in sadness. It ended in strength, honesty, and a courage far greater than her age. And as she walked away from the courthouse, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time.